How's it going, everybody? Hopefully you enjoy the fan art that is shown on the screen right now, but I do want to say before we get into today's video, if you are not subscribed already, please do so. Y'all are amazing, and I'm so happy that the channel has been growing the way that it has been. But with that said, I do want to ask you a very serious question. How many tokens do you want to swarm the board with? How big do you want your board to be? If you are a Magic the Gathering player and you want to have all the tokens on the board possible, you want to literally crap out a ton of zombies on the board and win with them, then this is the deck for you. You are going to be throwing so many zombies out at people, and it's all going to be thanks to the commander of the deck. This is Bladewing Deathless Tyrant, a 7-mana 6/6 with flying and haste, and boy is he amazing. He is an 83-cent commander in Rakdos colors, and he is going to do a ton of work for us today. As per usual, the idea is to have a $15 deck where the commander is $1 or less, and the rest of the deck is up to $15. And like I said, today's commander is Bladewing. He's got flying, he's got haste. Anytime he deals combat damage to a player or a planeswalker, that is important, he will generate a 2/2 black knight with menace for every single creature card in your graveyard. This means that the strategy we are going to be going with is filling our own graveyard as much as possible, and then proceeding to punch a player once, only once, and then getting all the tokens on the board when we do so. And there's going to be some very obvious ways to upgrade this deck later that I will briefly mention. But this is a $15 build, and we are running on a budget, so our goals are get the commander out as fast as possible, and any turn we are not getting the commander out and punching needs to be a turn that we are either controlling the board to slow the other players down, or a time that we are dedicating to throwing things into our graveyard. To facilitate this, our deck needs a lot of creatures to be able to shove a ton into the graveyard. So we are running 50 creatures right now. That is a lot of creatures. We are running 50. I also realized that I have the desk behind me from when I did my previous videos. Wow, I'm terrible at my job. Does that mean I've got a desk behind me here too? Huh, I guess I do. That desk is fine to be there in this shot anyway. It's okay. It's okay. So let's talk about what we have going on here. Let's start with the ramp section because it is going to be pertinent to get this commander out. He is a 7-mana commander. It's going to be very hard to pull him off all the time. So we have a 12-card ramp package, and every card in here we are trying to have them pull double duty. So we are starting with Convert. This guy is amazing. Convert is a 2-mana 2/1 with Toxic 1, so we can use him to scare people pretty easy. But he's a creature, so he goes into our graveyard very easy with self-mill effects. All of our creatures in the ramp section, if they get milled, we're not super worried about that. We can pay 2 life, add a mana of any color, so he's very easy mana fixing for a very low cost. Scampering Surveyor will give us any basic land out of our deck for 4 mana, while being a creature, same with Solemn Simulacrum, and of course, if they go to the graveyard from mills, we're okay with that. We also have Milken, Ironmur, and Leadenmur, and Ornithopter of Paradise as our dorks in the deck. Each of these can tap for one of our deck's colors, except for Milken, who instead gives us the benefit of milling us cards when it taps, which is just as important to what our deck is trying to do. As for land fetch, we have a Wayfarer's Bauble, because this guy is always going to do you a very, very good solid. When you're not in green and you need the ability to get lands, Wayfarer's Bauble will help you out a ton. And then we have Burnished Heart. This is one of the only decks that I'd recommend Burnished Heart in. This card ain't that great in most decks, but here it is getting us 2 basic lands, so it's double ramping us, and it's giving us an extra creature in the graveyard, which is super important for what our deck is trying to do. The rest of our ramp package are Hedron Archive, Sisay's Ring, and Worn Power Stone. Ramp cards that can all tap for 2 mana, because this is an overcosted commander, with the benefit that Hedron Archive can also draw us cards later on down the road if we end up in a situation where we need that. Now, Obviously, because we need lots and lots of mana, the ramp section is going to have to be as thick as it is, with all of the double mana producers or the single mana producers that happen to also be creatures. But we also want to be able to get through our deck as fast as possible, so we have a very interesting draw package this time. Normally, I have a 10-ish card draw package with lots of single-use cards. This time, our draw package looks very, very different. Almost everything we have that draws us cards needs to also have the ability to put a creature in the graveyard. So we are starting out with Burning Tree Vandal. It's got Riot, so we can come in with a 1/1 counter or haste. We're almost always going to pick haste. When it attacks, discard a card and then draw a card. Guilt Blade Prowler. If we have discarded a card, we get to draw a card. Mad Prophet can discard a card and draw us a card at haste speed and do it over and over again every time it taps. Rummaging Goblin can make us discard a card and draw a card. Dismissive Pyromancer, we can pay a mana into it to discard a card and draw a card, or blow this creature up to burn another creature for 4 damage. It's another kill spell we have access to. Moira's Scavenger has Death Touch and Haste, and we can discard a card to draw a card with it. And if we discarded a creature card, we generate an Orc Army token as well. Goblin Picker, we can pay 1 mana to tap it and discard a card and then draw a card. Fell Stinger allows us to exploit a creature, which sacrifices it, drawing us 2 cards and then causing us to lose 2 life, or we make any player draw 2 cards and lose 2 life, but we're almost always going to pick ourselves. And then we have Matsalanti, the Great Door, another card that lets us tap it, draw a card, discard a card, and we can flip it into a land that gives us a ton of mana based on the amount of permanent cards in our graveyard, which will be many because of the deck we are playing. And then we have Veronica, Dissident Scribe. This interesting card from the Fallout set has Menace, and anytime she attacks, we get to discard a card and draw a card. But if we discard 1 or more non-land cards, we get to also create a junk token, which gives us Impulse Draw. Every time we sack a junk token with their own effects, we can exile the top card of our library and then play that card at sorcery speed. So this will give us a very, very good double duty draw engine as we are going. But we also have a single-use draw in Faithless Looting. We play it once, draw 2 cards, discard 2 cards, then we can flashback it to draw 2 cards, discard 2 cards again. Very, very useful in this type of deck because this is effectively 4 more creatures, potentially, that can go into our graveyard for our commander to see. Then we have the War in Heaven. We play it for 6 mana, very overcosted, but still under our commander, drawing us 3 cards and then losing us 3 life. And then its second ability mills us by 3 whenever we get to the next turn with the Saga, which is good because that will probably be our turn 7 when our commander is coming out, or our moment we have 7 mana when our commander is coming out. And then, its final ability, choose up to 3 creature cards with a total mana value 8 or less in your graveyard and return them with a Necrodermis counter on them, which turns them into artifacts. We're not super keen on the artifacts thing, but being able to reuse some of our creatures will be helpful when you see our interaction section. Then we have Altar of the Wretched. When it enters the battlefield, sacrifice a non-token creature, draw X cards, and mill X cards, where X is the creature's power. That is a perfect ability in this kind of deck, giving us the ability to not only put a creature in the graveyard, but also mill a ton of cards while drawing cards. And then if we have 1 or more creatures, we can craft it, which is gives us the ability to create the Wretched Bone Mass. Crafting requires us to exile creatures, so do this after the commander's already generated us some tokens. The Wretched Bone Mass power and toughness are each equal to the total power of exiled cards used to craft it. It has flying as long as the card has flying. The same is true for First Strike, Double Strike, Death Touch, Haste, Hexproof, Indestructible, Lifelink, Menace, Protection, Reach, Trample, and Vigilance. Holy crap, that was a lot to get through, but basically the combined powers, the Captain Planet powers of everything we use to craft this card will turn it into a giant monster. This can be an alternate win condition in our deck, creating a giant bone mass, basically, with this. And we can pay 3 to bounce this from our graveyard to our hand if it ever dies, which of course gives us access to that draw engine again. So, fantastic card, pulling a lot of weight for us. But we also have to get to, that's the pause button. But we also have to get to the removal package of the deck, and I'm going to start off with the most important piece of the deck. This is Necron Deathmark. This guy does everything the deck wants to do. He is amazing. So he's got Flash, so he can be used at instant speed, even though our deck is low on Flash and instant cards. When this card enters the battlefield, blow up any creature, and then a target player mills 3 cards. There's a reason I chose to dedicate $1.50 of this deck's $15 budget to the Necron Deathmark, because he is an instant speed removal piece that kills a thing, gives us another creature on the board to throw away later, and also gives us the ability to mill ourselves. He does lots of work. He also allows us to turn Vampiric Tutors into sludge. Anytime somebody casts a Vampiric Tutor, cast a Necron Deathmark after it resolves, mill the top 3 cards of their deck, and suddenly their tutor is gone. But onto the rest of the removal. Bedevil gives us the ability to blow up an artifact, creature, or planeswalker at instant speed. Murderous Rider lets us use it as an instant to blow up a creature or planeswalker, and then we can cast it later, which lets us have a creature we have access to despite it being a removal spell. Eldest Reborn makes every opponent sack a creature or planeswalker, then they each have to discard a card. Then it will revive a creature from our graveyard, which is going to be easy for us to make happen. Our graveyard's going to be full all the time. Then we have Plaguecrafter. Everybody sacks a creature when it comes onto the board, along with Merciless Executioner and Fleshbag Marauder, which all do the same thing. Ravenous Chupacabra ETBs to blow up a creature. Dalek Drone ETBs to blow up a creature, and then that player loses 3 life. Feed the Swarm blows up a creature or enchantment, and then you lose life equal to that card's mana value. Rampaging War Mammoth will let us blow up an artifact by cycling it. X artifacts for the amount of mana we pay into its cycle cost. And then, of course, because it's a cycle, we get to replace it by drawing another card, which means we get to blow up artifacts, draw a card, and also make certain that more creatures get into our graveyard. Then we have Ghastly Death Tyrant, ETB, blow up an enchantment or give a creature we control Death Touch. Baleful Beholder, ETB, everybody sacrifices an enchantment, or creatures we control gain menace until end of turn. Then we have Abrade, it destroys an artifact or deals 3 damage to a creature at instant speed. And then we have my boy Meteor Golem. This lovely card can blow up anything except lands, and it is a fantastic removal piece that we can just never use, because it's probably going to go into the graveyard, and if we revive it, we do. That's fine, though. I'm fine with my son dying. I can handle it. Probably. Maybe. But that said, we probably need to move on to the next section, because if we are going to be throwing our cards away, you got to ask yourself, how are you making those cards touch the graveyard often enough for this commander to do what it wants to do? And so we have an 11-card self-mill section dedicated to solving that very problem for us. Beginning with the Ravenous Gigamole. When it ETBs, mill 3 cards. You may then put a creature from your graveyard into your hand if it was milled that way. The Screaming Phantom. When it attacks, we get to mill a card every single time. Tomacol Scrapsmith. Mill 3 cards and put any artifact from among our cards. We have 19 in the deck that were milled this way and put it into our hand. Then we have Eerie Soul Tender. ETB, mill 3 cards. We can then exile it from our graveyard to recur one of our creatures to our hand. Mindwreck Harpy. Whenever we go into combat, we can make each player mill 3 cards. Perfect for us. Flayed One. When it ETBs, we get to mill 3 cards. Gorging Vulture. When it ETBs, we mill 4 cards and then gain 1 life for every creature milled this way, of which our deck has 50. Golgari Thug, which has Dredge 4. Anytime that we would draw a card, we could instead Dredge 4 with this ability, throwing the top 4 cards of our deck into the graveyard. Undead Butler. When it enters the battlefield, we get to mill 3 cards, and if it dies, we can exile this to put any creature from our graveyard to our hand. And then Stinkweed Imp. When it deals combat damage to a player, to a creature, blow up the creature. It's basically Death Touch. And it's got Dredge 5, so if we would draw a card, we can instead throw 5 cards from our deck into the graveyard, which will probably be at least 3 or 4 of them will be creatures for our commander's ability. And then we have Blight Titan. When it enters the battlefield, we mill 2 cards, and whenever it attacks, we get to mill 2 cards as well. And every time it ETBs or attacks, whenever we mill, we get to incubate X, where X is the number of creatures in our graveyard, creating a token that is as big as our graveyard every single time, so long as we pay 2 mana into that token. Blight Titan is basically a secondary win con, a secondary token producer that will give us a ton of value. So I was really happy to be able to include him in this deck. Then we also need to make sure that our creatures that we are throwing to the graveyard have ways back onto the battlefield. So we have Doomed Necromancer, which can sack itself to revive a creature. Chainer, which can discard cards to revive creatures. Whisper, which can sack 2 creatures to revive 1 creature. Altar of Ball, which can exile a creature, usually a zombie token, to revive a creature at sorcery speed. And Young Necromancer, which can exile 2 cards from your graveyard to return any creature from your graveyard to the battlefield. Please exile lands, not other creatures, when you are using this card. You want this card to do work for you, not cuck you out of potential plays. But if we're milling all of our stuff, we need some alternate win cons. We don't just want to win with zombie tokens sometimes. Sometimes people get their life really, really far away from our ability to interact with it. So to facilitate that, we have a couple of ways to burn people. In Sir Conrad the Grim, whenever another creature dies or a creature is put into a graveyard from anywhere, deal 1 damage to each opponent. This also happens if a creature leaves our graveyard. So we can also use his effect to mill cards. He does everything our deck wants to do. He gives us reanimation fodder. He pays us off for reanimating. He pays us off for blowing up cards. He does a ton of work for us. He is fantastic at what he does. And then he's got a doggo too called Dreadhound. When he ETBs, we mill 3 cards, and if a creature dies or is put into a graveyard from a library, every opponent will lose 1 life. The Dreadhound does a lot of work for us as well, because we can use this as a way to just mill ourselves and our opponents out, like with Sir Conrad, and then generate burn damage. Both of these cards together, as we are milling out, will cause people to burn to death, and instead of killing our commander, they will have to kill one of these guys. So then we have to ask ourselves, how are we controlling the board? We already found a way to control individual cards, but if the board gets out of hand for us, we have to be able to handle that. To facilitate that, we've got a couple board wipes. One is Deathbringer Regent. When it ETBs, if there are 5 or more other creatures on the battlefield, we get to blow up all other creatures. This is a very simple card to use. Just big board, summon it, blow up board. Yeah, I don't know if I have to explain it further than that. Then we have Megaton's Fate. We can either use this to destroy 1 target artifact and make 4 treasure tokens, which our deck really likes, or we can use it to deal 8 damage to every creature and then give players 4 rad counters. If a player has a rad counter, they can, when their turn comes up, they mill cards equal to the amount of rad counters they have, and then they burn for every non-land that was thrown into the graveyard. And if they did that, they remove a rad counter for every non-land that they threw away and that they burned for. So this will give us another way to get a little bit of chip damage on other people, but generally it's going to help here. Oh shit, I'm still streaming. Huh, I wasn't supposed to still be streaming. Then we have Screeching Scorch Blast, which is basically the backup commander of the deck. Screeching Scorch Blast is a fantastic card that whenever it attacks, each player gets 2 rad counters that we can use to make sure that everyone is milling, especially ourselves. And when 1 or more non-land cards are milled, we can create that many 1/1 zombie creature tokens. This only happens once each turn, but this basically, with our own deck, anytime 1 or more non-land cards are milled in any way, shape, or form, we get to go ahead and make tokens. So with our self-mill, this works. With rad counters, this works. This works when we mill ourselves. This works when other people mill. It's just a good all-around backup commander for Bladewing. If Bladewing is not able to come out for whatever reason, then this will solve that problem for us. But we do happen to have a Rakdos commander, so we do have to make sure we have Rakdos lands available to us. So let's go ahead and talk about what we are going to be running in the deck as far as lands go. We have 12 swamps and 9 mountains. And then for our dual lands, we have a Foreboding Ruins, a reveal land, Command Tower, a Temple of Malice, which I normally don't like temples, but I want to make sure that the deck has smooth mana, and Scrying 1 can help us make sure that we have the right things on the top of our deck. Rakdos Carnarium is a bounce land that can return any land we have to our hand, but it also taps for 2 mana. Smoldering Marsh is another untapped land, so long as we have 2 or more basic lands. And Shadowblood Ridge is a good filter land. Then we have 7 fetching lands we have access to as well. Myriad Landscape can ramp us while fetching cards. Promising Vein, Jund Panorama, Shire Terrace, these are all basically the same card. They come into play untapped, then we can tap them to go into our deck and get a basic land onto the board. Escape Tunnel, Evolving Wilds, and Terramorphic Expanse are all effectively the same card. They just go into our deck and get a basic land. Then we have a couple utility lands as well. A Rogue's Passage so that our commander can make it through all the time, and then Mariposa, the military base. When it enters the battlefield, we can make it come into play tapped if we give ourselves 2 rad counters, and that means we can mill ourselves more. We can also pay 5 to draw a card, but this ability costs 1 less for every rad counter we have. Since the deck has a couple cards with rad counters, this is actually fairly easy to facilitate for us. And with that said, that is everything that is in our Bladewing budget deck. But let's say that you wanted to update the deck a little bit. You wanted to upgrade it. Well, let's start real quick with the ramp section. Here, you'd probably want to make sure that you've got any creatures that can tap for mana or give you mana possible, but where that's not possible, adding in cards like Thran Dynamo, Gilded Lotus, and Soul Ring will go a very, very good way into making sure that your commander can come out on time and quickly. Palladium Myrrh will also help as well, as it's a creature that can tap for 2 mana. When we get to the reanimation section, just swapping out cards like the Young Necromancer and the Doom Necromancer for just faster reanimate spells like Animate Dead, maybe even Stitch Together, and then, of course, obviously Reanimate. These will do you a ton of good here. In the removal and interaction section, if you've got the money to swing it, then it will never hurt you to add in things like a Noxious Gearhulk or Archon of Cruelty. Even a Combustion Gearhulk can do really well. Not necessarily in this section, but I'm thinking about the Gearhulks. So Combustion Gearhulk also does decently well in this kind of deck. Aside from those, just make sure that any way that you're removing things also is some kind of creature if possible, and you will be well on your way to functioning well. As far as self-mill goes, if you are increasing the budget of the deck, you have the ability to remove a couple of these one-and-done mills and add in more dredge. Stinkweed Imp is one of the best dredges in this color combination, but just making sure that there are more dredge cards will not hurt you at all. Oh, I forgot to mention, there's this card right here. I forgot, I was streaming on accident still, and I may have hit the button to end stream, and it caused me to forget. Bringer of the Last Gift. Bringer of the Last Gift is also in this deck. When it ETBs, if we cast it, each player sacks all their creatures, and then we reanimate everything from all players' graveyards. We are a reanimation and self-mill deck, so we will probably always have the biggest graveyard. There! I didn't forget Bringer of the Last Gift. I thought I was going to, but I don't know if this is a thing I edit out or if I keep it in. Let me know in the comments section if this should have been edited out or kept in, or if I should have done this in any other way. Do you guys prefer me doing this way, or do you prefer it be more edited and professional? I don't know what I'm doing anymore. Bringer of the Last Gift, everybody. But as for the draw package, I would try to keep as many of these creatures that can tap and draw a card and discard a card as possible. But if I were upgrading the draw package, I also might add in cards like Cut of the Prophets and Deadly Dispute. Any of the cards that can generate us treasures by sacking creatures and drawing us cards like Deadly Dispute. But Cut of the Prophets I also really like because it sacks a creature to double its draw and burn ability, which is fantastic in this deck. Just sacking a single creature and paying 3 into that card will give you a full hand of 7 most of the time. You draw 6. If you have 1 in your hand, boom, you got 7. Like, that just does a ton of work for you, and I would recommend it. As for board wipes, Deathbringer Region I really like, but if you were going higher in the budget, obviously like a Toxic Deluge or something in here would not go badly. A Blasphemous Act would also be very good here. You're never gonna be upset when you put a Deluge or a Blast Act in a Rakdos deck, and obviously you can work on the Rakdos lands themselves. Make sure that there are more Rakdos lands available to you. Where is my considering section? I'm sure I had something else in here. Oh, Brass's Tunnel Grinder I thought was going to be decent in the deck, but I just didn't end up using it very much. Vaults, Necropolis I ended up not using. What else is in here that we can possibly use? I wanted Dragoseth to work, but he didn't feel right. Sewer Nemesis also felt like he could work decently well, but that's less stuff that you would be upgrading budget-wise and more just like side grades. Anyways, let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Even the mess ups, even those things, I'd like to know. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you haven't already, and as always, everybody, insert end of video tagline here. Hey, I just quickly want to give a thank you to all of my wonderful patrons who keep this show running. YouTube and Twitch are a pretty bumpy ride at the best of times, and the stability that Patreon provides me is worth more than I can say here. I'd also like to thank each and every one of my $20 and up patrons here, and they would be Red Joker, Britzkrieg, Cameron, Dren, Jemshin, Smiling DM, Poundini, Mabbity Babbity, Naomi, Isaac, Agamotto, Jordan, Ravi, Giuni, Kiratorian, Prisma, all of you, Sagitt, I'm not saying that part, and Starlight. And finally, thank you to everyone else that helps keep this channel alive. While you're here, why not check out another video? And thank you for watching.